Welcome back to another episode of the O3 Dropcast, where we cover the offbeat, off-meta Legends of the Armory. We have a great episode for you. I'm Craig, aka Poop King, and I'm here with my two lovely co-hosts. Brice, want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Brice. I do have a toaster, and let's get started.
Now, is that part of our weekly? Is that ever going to? Are you ever going to tell me what that means? Or is
Probably,
everyone on
well,
the internet going to know why you're telling us about your toaster, and I'm the only person who doesn't get it?
specifically, you are the only person outside of that joke.
All right, well, let's move on to another person who likes to leave me out of fun things. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Chris.
Hey, well, welcome back to the listeners. I am Chris, also known as Smithel. I will say, if you want to say, want to be an international man of mystery here, Craig, the big topic in the Smith household after episode 1 is my 7-year-old daughter is losing her mind trying to figure out why you are called the Poop King. And so I promised her that I would ask you why you are Poop King, but feel free to leave it an international mystery if you want.
You're acting like I'm the only one with a secret.
Well, I can tell you the story, but it might take away from our segment, and it might be off-putting to new Flesh and Blood players. I promise you, new Flesh and Blood players out there, just because I have an air of royalty about me does not mean that I carry the stench associated with it. And I'm happy to go into that story later, but for now, let's dive right into this week's episode. This week we want to discuss Flesh and Blood. Is it the easiest it's ever been to get into the game? Is it the hardest it's ever been to get into the game? Where are we right now? And before we get into that, we had some exciting stuff happen this week. We figured out what chi is. We saw some new cards, and we got to see a little of the upcoming Armory deck. So let's first just go over those cards that we saw. Do any of them immediately excite either of you guys?
So, I mean, as a whole, I'm pretty excited. I mean, obviously, Chi being the big thing is now we kind of have an answer as to what exactly it is and how do we get it and how's it used and all that good stuff. I know when we had the first episode that was still in the air and everybody was, trying to figure out, how could this make sense? I have concerns about it. Don't get me wrong, especially, the whole transcend keyword that we got. But, I'm glad that we at least know how the main mechanic works, or I assume one of the main mechanics work for this set. That way we can kind of start getting an idea of how these heroes play, what some weaknesses are going to be, in this set, and, start hypothesizing around that.
Yeah, as it turns out, she is not stored in the balls.
No, not indeed.
That's what we thought. I think the one thing I do want to like the one thing that I think some of us did get right is that as a resource, it can be used to pay for, red or blue.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like you can use it for any other pitch, and it also is, its special chi abilities. And I think that's probably the only thing any of us predicted. I think we all got it very far off, and like I said, it's fun to speculate and stuff, but once you actually see what it is, it's like, okay.
You know what? It's funny. This is the set that I enjoy speculating the least, because this is the first time where I'm like, let them cook. Just let them cook. I'll tell you, there's a couple things that right now I'm already like, I don't know how I feel about Chi. I already can see it going to a place where there's going to be a mystic legendary chest piece. That's the only way to flip cards back over from resources into cards. And that's going to be a chase card that everyone wants. And without it, the deck's going to feel unplayable until eventually we find out that it's a Tunic deck. But I have concerns.
Sure.
But
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to do that though. Like I kind of feel like that's not going to be a thing. The whole, like what you said about like flipping them back over. They all seem like they're going to be very like second cycle heroes. You know what I mean? Like you get yourself a little bit of setup with those cards, and then now that you have the setup, now you're just biding your time until
And
you're
this
able to
is
like really use those chi abilities.
this is why I'm not deep into my speculation right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want them to show us a little bit of what they do. I can come up with ideas for like, oh, this is how I think cards might work in this set, but they, whether it be for marketing purposes or whether it be that LSS truly stands by their belief that this is going to be the best Flesh and Blood set. At this point, I'm just like sitting back and saying like, okay, show me Mysteria, show me Part the Mist Veil.
Yeah.
If it's, you know, I hope it delivers, but I can't keep up with the manic sort of guessing game
Yeah.
of like, oh, what is
Yeah.
it gonna do? Right now? I can't do that. I was all in on heavy hitters. I wanted to come up with every possible theory, but this set they've already surprised me with the heroes, so I'm just like, you guys keep cooking.
Yeah. That's the
One
reason why.
thing.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say that's the reason why. Like, I know there's a lot of people that sit there and say like, oh, I'm gonna start like theory crafting and building decks and things like that before the cards are revealed, and I've never understood that. Like, to me, it's sitting there saying like, okay, if I try to build a new deck right now, I'm missing almost every card in the set. So clearly, whatever I'm coming up with doesn't make sense. It's not gonna be anywhere close to what we land on. So like I'm good with the idea of saying, hey, it's like this is how I think she's gonna play. But to sit there and start throwing cards together or slapping things together, I think it's a little too early. Just because we don't know. Are these going to be designed to be second cycle heroes? Are these going to be designed to go fast so that you don't have the, we'll say the burden of potentially a whole bunch. We don't even know how many transcend cards you're going to have to generate chi. Like how much burden am I going to have late game in my deck of drawing potentially 4 no block chi cards? It could be anything. But
How does that experience affect someone who's still new to the game? Because second cycle is not the beginner's intuition on how to play the game. You're not planning for a second cycle. So they're going to be transcending cards, I imagine, because that's where you're going to be getting the power from. You'll get your resource right back after you play it. Like, of course, you're going to want to be doing that. How is that going to affect play for new players if, halfway through the game, they're like, man, I'm pulling a lot of resource cards.
My fear too is going to be that, and maybe it's just I'm way off. Like when you're talking new players in these cards, I think people are going to either really struggle with the idea of I have to flip this card, or I can almost guarantee there's going to be a new player that's going to get this card in a sealed pack, especially if they're not super familiar with TCGs as a whole. Open it to the inner chi side and go, oh, okay, slide it into a sleeve. You know what I mean? Not even sit there and look at it back. They're just going to say, oh, I see art on the card. You know what I mean? This is clearly it. So I mean, I certainly have some concerns with this from a new player perspective. As a veteran player, I'm excited. I like this mechanic. I think it's kind of cool, something different. I do have concerns like, God, we see how many Dromai problems there are with people flipping dragons and taking out of the sleeve and dealing with all that, or Prism with the angels, that if there's too many transcended cards, we're going to be spending half of the match watching somebody go like, yank, flip, drop, yank, flip, drop, or somebody have a massive side deck of, just chi, cards or other sides. And so I have concerns with that. But I don't know if I think this is going to be the most new player friendly set as a whole.
Not at all. It's like you said, more veteran players. Like we understand the importance of pitch stacking in second cycle. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm good at it or that I even have the attention span to remember that, for that far into the game. But like, you could also look at it as a way of like, new players coming into the game now are going to be encouraged to learn those skills right out of the gate, where I think a lot of us started playing it at first on a very just a very high level, or not high level like pro, high level like like high level, like not getting into the nitty gritty of it. So when you're not when you're not really like forced to understand that kind of stuff, I think a lot of new players just kind of brush it off until they realize like, oh crap, I've hit a wall. I'm not getting any better. Maybe I need to start looking at this game at a deeper level. Where
So
with this
what you're
set kind of
saying
forces
is
you to.
I guess what I'm hearing is may have like a theory then that it will show the player the error of their ways more clearly in second cycle.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
I think that skill becomes way more obvious that that's as a new player walking in. I think it becomes way more obvious that that's a skill that I'm gonna have to learn. I'm gonna have to get good at, and I'm gonna have to pick up as like a core tenet of the game. Whereas
Yeah.
like I said, for I think a lot of us, we just kind of learned the rules and learned the interactions and said, okay, these cards do that, without really getting into the concepts around like value and pitch stacking and second cycle and that kind of stuff. But now you've like kind of embedded it into, like, you've kind of made it just like an intrinsic part of this set, and the way that the cards work. But again, yeah, we don't even know how many transcend cards there are going to be.
Yeah.
Is it something you have 4 of in your deck, or is it something you have 10 of in your deck?
Mhm.
I think less, because like Chris said, you're going to have a lot of no blocks at the end of the game, which is obviously never fun.
we do know
At
at least 4 transcend cards, and we know 3 cards that get a benefit from transcend. The 3 hero specific cards that we got this week are the Sacred Art Cycle, Sacred Art Undercurrent Desires, Sacred Art Immortal Lunar Shrine, and Sacred Art Jade Tiger Domain. I want to go first here, talking about the one that I'm most excited for,
Go for
and
it.
that's Undercurrent Desires. I'm not that sure how I'm going to feel about the banish play of new, but Fang Strike and Slither.
Mm-hmm.
It says create a Fang Strike and a Slither in your hand. And that's exciting to me. Not knowing what that is. Again, I'm not going deep into theory crafting, but just seeing Assassin get these tools that I will go a little theory crafting and say I think these are more ephemeral cards like Crouching Tiger.
Yeah.
It seems like that if you're creating things in your hand, I imagine they're going to be ephemeral.
They also sound like reactions to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I can see the Slither, and again, I don't want to go too deep in the theory crafting, but if we're sitting here saying, okay, Zen's Crouching Tiger, we've seen in all the art, like her have this kind of ephemeral kind of snake kind of thing. I think the Slithers are going to be, like a Crouching Tiger-esque kind of card, and I think the other one's going to be like, great, some sort of reaction, some sort of buff or something like that. Now the question's going to be is, how much is this going to help assassins? So, I mean, if we look at Asuri and Arachne right now, they're a lot more comfortable with, kind of having lower card hands. I mean, like an Asuri can throw like an Isolate and Arsenal, play the Isolate, and then just have a 2-cost in hand and just throw that out for free after they react and use the ability. Arachne a lot of times is often okay blocking 3 cards and just throwing down 1 attack. So I like this idea for assassins to have a way to get something in hand. Now, what I kind of think is neat about it is when you're comparing to things like Crouching Tigers, a lot of that stuff says create a Crouching Tiger and your banish zone. You know what I mean? Is there going to be
the ones that say in hand are the best ones because you can use that for Art of War.
Yeah, and that's it. So it's how much opportunity are we going to have now in the assassin class to really start doing hand manipulation kind of plays? Will there be an assassin that's running an Art of War, for example, like you said, that says, hey, look, now we're banishing this, and then if I have a way to play it from banish, as Azuri, or not Azuri, New is kind of seeming to focus around as kind of the banish zone, that gets even more exciting. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what the Fang Strike and the Slither are, because I think once we see what that is, then that's going to give us a lot more of an idea of what type of assassin New is going to become. So yeah, super cool. Also, the art is absolutely gorgeous. I mean,
all of this is
stunning.
Yeah, I will say, I'm a little nervous about the amount of marvels that are in this set. You
don't have to collect them all. You don't have to.
You're right. Now, and again, last set, the only ones I have are the Trash Man and his younger version. So I'm perfectly happy not collecting them all, but I think it says in the product information there's something like 16, and we've seen what,
Wow.
4 or 5 maybe. I mean, we got the Chi.
We've seen I think we've seen 10.
Oh,
Because
yeah, I guess
we saw 6 from the heroes.
yes,
We saw 3 from the Mystic Arts, and then we saw Preserved Tradition.
yes,
That's right.
and the Chi has one too.
Well,
thought the Chi
I
was the
think
back.
the
I think it's the back of it.
Marvel Chi
Yeah.
is just the back of the Marvels.
Well, and that's the question though. But are they counting that as its own kind of thing?
I don't think. I don't think that counts as 2.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they were like, this is in Marvel art, like you get the Chi out of it.
Okay.
So yeah, I was a little concerned with that.
So let's talk a little bit not real quick, but let's go over these other ones a little bit. Brice, do either of these get you extra excited for this set? Extra excited for a specific hero? What was your reaction to seeing these cards come out?
Yeah, I mean, I like illusionists. I'm not gonna lie. You know what I mean? Like I'm looking forward to it. So for Lunar Shrine, well, I was actually just pulling this up on February while Chris was
Mhm.
talking. Totally ignored everything you said, my dude. I was looking up cards. I'm just kidding. So this, create 2 spectral shield tokens, put a +1 counter on each aura with ward you control. So obviously spectral shields. It's actually interesting. I thought I was going crazy, but I wasn't. So the older spectral shield tokens did not actually say ward. The ones from Dynasty and onward, which I think is just Dynasty, actually say ward. So I was sitting there like thinking, I'm looking up on February, like, okay, now how many auras with ward actually exist in the game? Because I was forgetting that Spectral Shield got that errata, and I tell you what, it's not that many. Sigil of Protection, Phantom Tidemaw, Tome of Ao, Blessing of Spirits, and it was like pretty much those couple things from like the Dynasty cycle and Sigil. So
And a lot of those are going away your next turn anyway. They're not staying on the board for long.
Yeah. So it feels like it's like definitely specifically targeted towards spectral shields, but not that you couldn't, attack with a Sigil of Protection, I guess. Like, if you had a way to do that. I'm sure there's going to be something to do with weapons, auras become weapons and so on. So those count under that. But yeah, it definitely looks like it's obviously like primarily targeting spectral shield there. That's I'm really interested to see if this turns up, like was mentioned, to be a turtle up and then swing with 6 power spectral shields at the end, or if we're actually going to get more of like more aggro, being able to just like ping with spectral shields basically the entire game, which isn't like that far off from what Prism did sometimes, but I'm curious if it's going to be primarily focused around using your auras as weapons.
That's fair.
How about you, Chris? Why don't you cover the Jade Tiger domain, since we haven't talked about that one.
What, you let me be the ninja man here? This may be a terrible mistake. So, I like, and this is something that like I don't know if I'm super thrilled with. And again, maybe it's just because I'm not a ninja main here or anything like that. But so like the crouching tigers, I know we kind of talked about that a little bit being the the ninja thing. But the card does read, hey, look, you play another blue card this turn, choose 3, and transcend obviously being the key one going along it. But create 2 crouching tigers in hand, and then your crouching tigers get +1 this turn. So it's interesting again that we're talking cards to hand. I definitely think that's kind of a cool thing here. I do like the crouching tigers get +1 this turn, and I think the one thing that we haven't talked about a lot on any of these, and if we did, I apologize, I missed it, but none of these cards block. You know what I mean? They have
all instants.
Yeah, all instant. None of them have any kind of block value associated with them. So the two questions that come in my mind are basically, first, is there an opportunity to play this on an opponent's turn for whatever reason? Like, let's say if it's like, hey, it's getting late game, I absolutely, need something to kind of pull myself out of it. I have something in Arsenal to give a Crouching Tiger +1. Play this at the end, if the opponent's turn doesn't block, I get my Crouching Tigers in hand, I go to my turn, and I kind of just try to swing in with one or something like that. That's curious to me.
The problem with that is the Crouching Tigers would lose the +1.
Yeah, you'd be giving that up, but if you had, like I said, any other way. But it's interesting to me in that part because I don't know, and these are all legendary, so you only have one of them in hand. I need to see what else is coming with it to really be, in on it. I feel like personally this is probably one of the weaker ones out of all the three that I've seen. But again, I could be wildly off. And Craig, you're the ninja main, so if you're more excited about it, I will fully trust your judgment.
Well, it's interesting that you said earlier that, you don't understand why people go and put together lists and start to theory craft as soon as heroes are released, because I did that with all three of them. And the way I do that is I just look at the hero, I say, what are the cards that have combo or care about Crouching Tigers for Zen? What are the cards with stealth? What are the cards that care about spectral shields? Which ones am I willing to bet on that I want to have a playset of when this set comes out so that I don't have to get them if they skyrocket?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, because some of them will. And they probably won't be the ones we think. But this card is very tricky, right? Because if you play a blue card that doesn't have Transcend, the way to play this card involves 3 blue cards in your hand. Yeah. Because you have to play a blue card with Go again.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to pitch 3. You could do a red and a yellow, but then that's an extra card you're down. Mm-hmm. To play this lets you transcend, so you're going to get 3 resources back. I like Wind Chakra. I like the idea of, the first one coming in for 6. That's cool. But if I can't make more Tigers that turn, and you can with Zen's ability, so maybe that's it, is just maybe Zen's not going that wide on Tigers. Maybe he's just going 3 wide, but ending with a pouncing key or some, because I play Tiger Benji. And when I play Tiger Benji, first of all, I love that deck because it's just a degenerate deck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Flesh and Blood is not a math game when you can just play Tigers Benji.
Fair.
The math is can you count to 2, and also how many Tigers do you have?
But you have to count it to a bunch of times. That gets hard.
Count it to over and over and over again. It's so much fun. No, but I love that deck. But that deck cares about going as wide as it can with Tigers. So the best, when I go and I see Zen and I put a card into my February list, the first one I go to is something like Tiger Swipe. Tiger Swipe has combo. When it hits, it makes Crouching Tigers in your banished zone equal to the amount on the chain.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm reading in this card and what I'm reading from Wind Chakra is, don't come in for Crouching Tiger for 1 7 times. Come in for Crouching Tiger for 7, Crouching Tiger for 3, Pouncing Key for 7.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit more of I think that's a little. I don't want to say that's more like Ira, because it's not. Ira did her own thing, but it's going to be interesting. It might prove that there's more space for Crouching Tigers than I thought.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit, because you keep mentioning Wind Chakra. So that's kind of the other 3 cards that have come out this set, right? So we got the Wind Chakra, the Tide Chakra, and the Moon Chakra. And, just again, for anybody listening to audio only, Wind Chakra, obviously, next Crouching Tiger gets +3. If you've Transcended, gets +5 instead. So, you know, the question is, how much, with these being legendary cards, the Sacred Arts, how much are you respecting those if somebody's holding one card in hand and, having an attack with Go Again? Do you sit there and say, I'm always going to assume it's going to be the Sacred Arts, coming in with those Tigers? Or do you sit there and just say, I got to play it like assuming, statistically there's more of a chance to see something else until it hits and it turns into Chi? Do these feel like respectable cards, I guess, is the question.
I mean, most of them seem like they're finishers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, these all kind of seem like things that you're going to want to... My images are blurry. They cost 3?
What, the Sacred Arts? Yeah.
The Sacred Arts.
Okay. Yeah, the Sacred Arts, they cost 3.
Yeah, so you're going to have played a blue card already and have a blue card to pitch for your art. So, like, with the Illusionist one, that's just going to be a finisher for sure. And they're instants, so.
And there is more to talk about these cards, but I'd like to, if you guys don't mind, move us into our main topic for today. So I want to ask you guys the question. We'll go point by point on some of the things currently that make us believe yes or no. But is it harder than ever to get into Fab? Or is it easier than ever? Where does it lie for you? And please answer in a yes or a no.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean,
how dare you say that?
No.
Where do you think Fab is as far on that spectrum?
I mean, it's looking at the subreddit. I am seeing more and more people every day coming in with posts that are, hey, new to the game. What sets do I buy first? What product do I buy first? How do I get into the game? And from like the perspective of products to buy, I think that also even is getting a little more difficult because you got to explain to people Living Legend. You got to, explain like buying Monarch. Like, I don't know, probably not the best unless you really need some stuff from it.
Term EV.
Yeah. Never say EV to a new player. Don't ruin them.
Not when you're talking about Monarch, at least.
Yeah, but the round the table pack, and the basically the same thing for Part the Mistveil with you're going to get the blitz decks, you're going to get a playmat. I'm not a big fan of those products and the way that they are. I'm more so not a fan of the way they're like packaged and distributed and stuff like that. I think there's so many things about that dumb box that could be better, from the design of it to the way it fits on shelves. Like, no store has like shelving space to fit a bunch of really long boxes like that. Like,
Fair.
put them in something more boxy. It sucks to look at those things and not know what's in them. Like, nothing unless there's something on the bottom that is like a description. It's hard to like look at that on a shelf and see like, oh, that's like an intro package. Like, I should buy that as a new player and get all the blitz decks and a playmat and stuff like that. But like aside from just like the marketing parts of it, I do still think it's like a good product for a player to be able to pick up those decks and incentivizing things with like how heavy hitters had the EA draw swords and stuff like that in it. Like, it's a good product for a new player to get. I don't know that these heroes are gonna be the best heroes to learn the game on, though. You know what I mean?
How are you feeling, Chris?
So, I'm a little bit different than Brice here. So, I think I personally don't have as much of an issue with the box. I agree that it's difficult from a store perspective to kind of store it. I also agree that if we're trying to go in with the idea of a new player walking into an LGS to sit there and say, what is this item? There's nothing that draws my eye. I mean, even the Ryan RV Dory kind of classic battles one, that I feel like did a better job in terms of, hey, look, this is a complete set of one player versus one player. You know, you could hang it up, grab it off the box, you know, off the wall, do that kind of thing easier than this. Granted, this one had, you know, these, you know, around the table and all that have, you know, better play mats, all that kind of stuff. They look nicer. You can use it as a card storage box later. So pros and cons on that aspect. My issue is with the round the table set. I like that because it was this is UPF focused. You can keep it together and treat it almost like a board game-esque kind of deal where you pull it out when you have friends over that don't know how to play the game. You say, here's the deck, here's the deck, here's the deck. We're going to play it, and then you keep it together and you throw it back into the closet. My issue with this new one, and maybe when we see the decks I'll be completely off, is I don't think you're going to have the same kind of feel. Now, I've also heard, and I don't know how true this is, that the only way to get these Blitz decks is going to be buying it in that collector's kind of box. It comes with the playmat and things like that. And at $70, I feel like that's a big ask for a new player if that is the case. Whereas before, we could say, hey, look, here's a $10, $15 deck max. Walk into your store, buy it, sit down, play it, you're out the door. You know, having to say to somebody, if you want to play this, you got to commit to 3 or 4 decks at once. That's problematic. You know, again, I don't know if that's 100% true. I just heard that like today, I believe, that was the case. And to me, that feels like a missed opportunity versus just having the kind of the blocks of Blitz decks that we're used to. So again, I'm trying to, even as we're talking here, dig through the product information to see if we have that or if that is the case. But I'm certainly hoping I'm wrong on that.
So I think I have a hot take here.
Sure.
Flesh and Blood.
What? A hot take, really?
The most overused phrase ever. Flesh and Blood is currently the easiest it has ever been to get into the game. And in 4 months, it will be the hardest it has been since I've been playing, which is since Outsiders, to get into the game. I can't speak for before. Here is why. Right now, I think Heavy Hitters is probably the most new player friendly set that has come out, period. Before that, in my time in Limited, was Bright Lights and Outsiders. Outsiders was a fatigue format where legendaries were still legal. And Bright Lights was I don't even really know. I don't know where my thoughts ended up settling on Bright Lights. At times I loved it, at times I hated it, but there were some complicated mechanics. The mechanics of Heavy Hitters are self-contained in a very nice way. There's a uniformity between classes and tokens that plays very well for new players. There's not too many keywords you have to remember. I think it works really well. I think the most complicated heroes for a new player in that set are Victor and KO. And KO is not that difficult. The most difficult thing I'm talking a baby TCG player, is understanding zones, right? However, this next set is going to have exponentially more difficult game pieces just already in Chi. We also have coming out the Armory KO deck. And there's a lot of talk about the game pieces in there, whether they're chase cards, whether new players will even be able to get this. But the problem, I think, is if KO Living Legends in 4 months' time, then you have a product that is confusing to new players, and it doesn't achieve the primary goal of what we're led to believe is the primary goal of this product. Obviously, businesses got to sell product. I have no hard feelings about that. I have no hard feelings about people wanting to buy the singles from this to play for their constructed sets. But to on-ramp people, it is going to be, I think, a bit of a rocky rollout for this product.
Yeah,
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you on that, but also there's a lot of like considerations around. They obviously had this product planned out already. You know what I mean? They're not rolling off the cuff. They're thinking 3 years ahead. You know what I mean? I don't know that they thought that KO would just so aggressively start racking up LL points. You know what I mean? Like this was definitely planned and produced before they knew that KO was just going to start like running train on everything.
Absolutely.
Right?
I don't expect LSS to have a crystal ball. That's you know what, this is one of those things that I hope everyone online can take a step back and realize that this is just a human, like, naturally occurring problem in the game. This wasn't like it's not like they were like, oh, let's make this hero that can LL in a record time and then we'll ship this product with no one to buy it. Like that they would never do that. And they make sets far enough in advance. People were saying like, well, maybe people know something about what's coming out that'll like sync KO. I don't think it'll be that dramatic. I also think when it comes to how difficult the game is to get into right now, KO being the best deck is actually probably the easiest it is to get into the game. It's just big numbers. But in 4 months, when we have Enigma and we have this new Prism who's dealing with Spectra, we're dealing with Ward, instant speed stuff, I think that the game is going to look a lot more complex. So I actually do think it's good to have KO in the meta right now because of the simplicity of it. I don't like the deck particularly. I don't think the hero is very interesting. But I think that as we move into the summer of Flesh and Blood and into the fall, when we think about new players coming into the game, KO is a great hero for them to be doing that on, because a lot of it is almost at face value, is a way to say it. You look at the card and you say, oh, I know the value of this card. It's a 6 or it's an 8, depending on if I draw and discard a 6.
Yep.
Versus, what is the value of Genesis?
Yeah.
Hard to say. So I think right now we are in a place where it is easier than it will be later this year. I think Prism's going to get more representation. I think Mistveil is going to add more difficult game pieces. It also is something I wanted to mention is when we looked at those cards earlier, it's adding a new rule, which is that the legendary rule now only applies to constructed. So before, when we talked to new players and we said, classic constructed, it's a deck that you made, limited, we're going to make it here. And the difference is you can run any number of certain cards in limited, but except for legendaries, and you give them the whole spiel on the different formats. This is just one more thing they have to kind of remember and be like, oh, well, that's how this is different. It's not a big thing, but it is just another layer of complexity.
Yeah.
When we're already getting more double-sided cards, an entirely new resource, and from what I've heard, I know, Chris, you were saying you heard that this is going to retail at $70 and they're only going to be available together. I heard Enigma's difficulty rating is also 5 stars on their star scale out of 5. The only other one that I know of, I believe, was Kano. That's like a good warm up we should do beforehand. Kano. I bet Uber is doing that. I bet all those guys. But anyway, so when we look at that as well, is that going to be off-putting to someone or not? Because I know for me, when I look at joining the game, I'm a vibes guy. I don't like. I went on Katsu because I liked Ninja, and then I found out he got to tutor for cards, and I was like, I'm in.
Yep.
I don't have to worry about this pitch stacking crap. Great, I'm in.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people are like, all right, a wizard. I identify with wizards. I relate. When I play D&D, I'm a wizard, right? I really think that's one of Flesh and Blood's best assets for new players.
Yeah.
Um,
So here's my issue, my take on all that is I am very much in a very similar camp as you, Craig. I think that the concepts that LSS is coming out with in terms of product is on the right track. I think the CC deck as a whole, like having these CC Armory decks, amazing idea. Love it. I'm hoping that they release this not just always with the new heroes that are coming out, but give me a Bravo one. Give me something that's kind of like your core, your staple heroes. I don't care if it's 2025, as long as the heroes are still around and not close to LL. Give me that so that way I can tell somebody, here's a big hitting hero. Here's a go fast, go wide, kind of like Fi hero. Here's all these different things, and then trying to make it work. Now, my issue where I'm sitting there and I'm saying I think that we're in agreement about the whole 4 months from now it's going to be difficult is I talked to my wife, about this, who is probably one of the smartest people that I know. And she loves board games, loves all that kind of stuff. I've brought her to a couple events. She's phased out of it, out of Flesh and Blood, because she said, first, there's so many keywords as it is. You know what I mean? Like she loved Fi. She said, look, I think Fi makes a lot of sense. She likes Bolton, even though, I don't think it was the hero she started with when her and I were both learning the game. So fully agree that we probably weren't playing him right. But she liked the idea of attack, swing sword, attack, swing sword. But, whenever we got to an armory and she started to play, and she did, I think, I think she did one RTN or something like that at Green Tree with us. She said sitting down with people and having them be like, I got this keyword, I can do this, and this. It's just overwhelming. And so my fear is sitting here saying, as we continue to introduce more keywords and more mechanics and things like that, we're going to have what I call like the commander magic problem, where somebody says, my card has X on it, and then just starts doing stuff with the assumption that people remember a mechanic that was released 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, like horsemanship, like in Magic. It's one of those things of sitting there saying, like, at what point do we have to sit there and say, let's not dumb down the heroes, but let's make sure that, we have a 5-star rating hero like Enigma, but let's make sure that we have somebody that's relatively straightforward like KO. And then how do we tailor products around that to bring in a new player base? My biggest fear with Fab is that while it is still growing and we see more and more posts every day, right now of people saying, hey, I'm seeing this, I'm interested in it, what do I need to do to get started? My fear is that we're getting close to the peak, and then we're going to start to plateau. And my concern is going to be when we get to that plateau point that we're going to not focus on the new players as much. And it's going to be a lot harder at armories. You're going to get a lot of people that come in and don't want to play because, as my wife has said to me, she's like, it's not that I hate the game and I think it's bad. She's like, I think it's well designed and it seems like fun and I get it. I just don't want to walk into a store and lose every single match. Like, I understand that I'm not going to win an armory or be number one the first time I play, but it's just not fun always losing and then having somebody almost talk down to you for not knowing what everything is.
And as you're talking, Chris, one of the things that I'm more and more sure of is if these Blitz decks come pre-packaged and in a $70 set, that will be a tremendous error on their part, a non-forced error, because I hear you with, and I hear your wife saying there's too many keywords. But when we played, and in fact, you guys weren't there, but the other week when we did the heavy hitters pre-con, I felt that it was so well contained. It was so well contained. Yeah. The keywords were simple. It's like wager and clash, and is there even another? Like maybe there's overpower, But it was so simple, and so I think that if these decks are, locked away in like this collector's item thing where you have to buy an odd number of them just to be able to play them, and players can't just grab a deck off the shelf and get a game in, then I think it's looking a lot worse.
Yeah. Now, and the one thing I think is funny too, and it's good that you brought up heavy hitters, and you kind of having your recent experience too with your girlfriend coming in and playing, is that I believe like events like pre-releases are the time stores and communities need to focus on new player acquisition. You know, I brought my wife to a couple pre-releases with me as the sets came out. And it's funny because the first one, like, I'm like, look, this is the perfect time. You know, all the keywords are kind of self-contained. You know, so you only really have to learn 2 or 3 of them. And and I made the mistake of saying, and you know, nobody knows anything. Like this is all new to everybody. And then we walk into it, and she hears us talking, like naming cards, saying what they do, having it memorized, just because that's kind of what we do. And she goes, I thought nobody knew anything. You know, clearly you guys all know what's going on. And I'm like, oh, well, spoiler season. And we kept up with it. And, you know, she's like, oh, that's BS. She goes, there should be no spoilers. It should just be, here's the set. You rip into it and you go. And part of me, I'm like, I get that. But I think, you know, that's going to be where Flesh and Blood fails or succeeds, is going to be how do we continue to draw people in at these pre-release times? How do we generate hype for that and not just stay in this, you know, talk bubble, so to speak, of the same, you know, 1,000 people or 2,000 people or whatever the number of players is, just echo chambering off of each other. You know, how do we draw more in? And I think we're doing a good job at that now, but I have serious concerns in the future unless there is good new player focus coming from LSS and Fab. And if the direction is going to be pre-packaged $70 blitz decks, that's a major concern for me. Major
That ain't
concern.
it, James.
Yeah.
That ain't it, James.
Before we lose the thread on this, both of you kind of brought this up in one way or another, but I remember back in probably 2013, I decided that I was going to try to pick up Magic the Gathering again. The last time I really played Magic the Gathering was probably like Tempest Block. So I was picking up TCGs again after literally 16 years of Magic, right? And it was that exact experience. It was trying to go in somewhere and being like, okay, I'm, you know, playing this deck with this new whatever it was, like M13 or whatever at the time. And it's just you're not only sitting there missing 16 years, 15 years of cards and keywords and interactions, but also just like modern and like understanding how the different formats work and all that. So like there's more barriers of entry to a new card game aside from just, oh, everybody knows these cards and everybody knows these interactions and these keywords. There's more to it than that. There's like understanding like, oh, I think I was teaching somebody the game and they had like 3 of in a blitz deck. It's like, oh, well, you can do this in CC. Why can't you do? Okay, well, different, you know, constraints when you're in different formats and stuff like that. Um, and having picked up Star Wars Unlimited recently, I had the exact opposite experience, and I think it's more the experience that you guys are saying that Fab needs to have, of just like, I learned how to play the game. I watched a YouTube video at work that day, and that was when I learned how to play the game. My first experience was literally going to a draft, and it was the most fun I had in a long time. Just like nobody, I mean, it was the maybe like still the first week of the game out, right? Like nobody really knew what was going on. Everybody was just kind of like trying to make something work with the draft and not, you know, no one really like broke the game yet. But that's the difference between like 16 years of a 16-year gap of Magic and, you know, the 5 years or whatever we've had of Flesh and Blood. And yeah, like some of those keywords and some of those interactions are like super not intuitive for new players. A friend of mine wanted to learn the game, and I literally sent him like the Heroes of Wrath article on the website. I was like, look at which hero you think is coolest, and I'll get you a deck on Fabrary, and we'll learn how to play on like tabletop. And he picked Kano, and I said no. Not like your first game of Fab is not going to be with Kano. There's so many like interactions and all this kind of stuff, and he just like and I think what it boils down to, kind of like where we where we end up with this whole, anecdote is I think it depends on what kind of gamer you are. You know what I mean? Like, are you somebody who has a history of TCGs? If you've played TCGs in the past, I don't think you're going to have that much of a problem picking up on some of the intricacies of Fab. Like, sure, it might be, Overpower and Clash are very, very straightforward and very simple, and they don't need a lot of explanation. But if you're like a TCG veteran, I don't think it's going to be that big of a hurdle. And I think it kind of, I don't know. I don't know if the target audience of new players is targeted towards people who have never played a TCG before. You know what
Right.
I mean?
And
It just kind of seems like you got to split it down the line somewhere.
I agree with you. I will also say that I think that this is a problem that there is no going back on in constructed, but in limited, there is a way forward. So if this is the most complex set this year coming out, part the miss fail, and the next set returns to something more akin to heavy hitters, then I don't think we actually have an issue in my mind of an oversaturation of keywords. Because I really feel that that's, like you're saying, a lot of established TCG players, and maybe not even established, but they've played enough kitchen table Magic. They're gonna pick up. They're gonna be able to like realize, oh, okay, well, this is dominate, that's overpower. They're not the same. Okay, yeah, I get it. And I think one of the things that's needed to do that is the environments where we bring people in a limited capacity. And I'm not using it for the limited format, but saying we are only going to, I guess I am, but like we're only going to play with these cards because these cards are all the ones I want you to learn right now.
Yep.
I don't want you to learn about talents yet. I don't want you to learn about arcane damage yet. And it's those. By that way, you do incremental steps into the game, so it's not overwhelming when all of a sudden someone says rupture, and you're like, rupture's not a mechanic in Flesh and Blood, and then you find out that it actually is a keyword.
And they did that with the Ira decks, though. You know what I mean? Like when the game first started, they had the welcome decks, and you look at those, and the whole point is that they had all the types of cards, right? Every at the time, it was attacks, D-reacts, instance, and attack reactions. Right? That was like basically. I'm sure I glossed over something, but you look at the way those decks are built out, and it's literally just made to show new players and expose them to all the different types of cards and how they can interact with each other. So, do the new products coming out kind of, you know what I mean? Like, is there a new welcome deck they need to print? Do they need to go back and start saying like, we're basically doing the welcome decks again, but they're going to be with different heroes that have more of the complex interactions?
Yes, they need a new deck. If for the sole reason of, I hate whenever I give somebody an Ira deck, like one of those like new ones that are like, hey, here's learn how to play, and then they go, okay, this hero seems cool, I'll play this, and I go, you can't. You know what I mean? Like, I think if I had one wish, the 2025 welcome deck would be Bolton. It has weapon attack focus, it has attacks, and it has reactions. After that, you can throw in a D-react. You can basically be like, here's a soul shield, as like a one of in the deck, and go from there. You cover everything.
Yeah.
I also think a warrior is, it's funny, like they were so close. They were so close with classic battles, and it just was like not a good product. It didn't have the value. It wasn't good for onboarding people. I mean, it's the titanium bauble package, but they were so close. And I think that like I would have loved if they said, here's KO Armory deck and here's Kasai's Armory deck. That would have made me so happy, because then it's also, you get a choice, do you want to play as the savage, brute, raw, smash, or do you want to play as, the, cool warrior chick with like double sabers? I don't know if she's the best hero for it, but I like the idea of warrior being a way to onboard people to the game.
What I think that they should do is, honestly, they should move away from these blitz decks entirely, and they should do something like you said, Craig, where they say, okay, look, here's 2 heroes from the latest set. We're coming out with 2 armory decks. And when you open the box of the armory deck, there's a little 1-page insert that says, remove these cards to make a blitz deck. And you just pull out what it is, and you can still sit down and say, I'm buying this today. I'm sitting down at my LGS. They have a blitz night. I'm removing X cards. I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? You give somebody
That's not a bad idea, actually.
Perfect.
you give somebody a full
That's actually a
CC
pretty
deck,
good idea.
you give somebody a full blitz deck, and you give them options saying which hero looks cooler to you.
Yeah. I mean, there was talk about this on Reddit and on Twitter about the viability of like those decks in a actually to go in and like perform in an armory, and the balance between like making them decent decks but also not devaluing like some of the power cards, you know what I mean? Because you can't just, unless you really wanted to tank tunic prices, you can't go like throwing a tunic in those decks or something, you know what I mean? But it's I don't know, maybe that's like for next week, just about how viable those decks are actually going to be.
I think they're going to be very viable, and I think that personally, this is where I start to feel that maybe we're hearing too much from pro players and like top level players. We're viewing it not at the armory level enough. And maybe I'm wrong. You know, I certainly know that when I first came to an armory and I didn't have legendary equipment for a deck, I felt kind of out of place, and maybe times have changed now that that's not necessarily going to be so much of an issue. But I think sometimes when we talk about the power level of decks and the ability to just sit down and feel like you have a fair shot, maybe that we get a lot of voices just by the nature of how content creation works, and how if you're, you know, succeeding really well, you can get a bigger audience, these kind of things. I think we hear from a lot of people who are looking at it through a lens that is a step or two removed from a new armory player.
Or it's called rage baiting, and we're definitely going to start doing it. Just real bad takes just to get everybody to yell. But I do think there are two, like both of the things, you know, the last 2 things we talked about, there are 2 giant asterisks above both of these. And it is funny, you know, I think very briefly, or at the beginning of the recording, you had mentioned something about just like voices on the internet and on Twitter, and there's a lot of, it feels dumb to even have to say this because, you know, I've made the joke before that Twitter is the only place that you can say I love pancakes and everyone comes back and says I can't believe you hate waffles. Like you know what I mean? Everything is so, and I guess that's the burden of social media and stuff, everything is so face value. But like the 2 big asterisks around this are your mileage may vary on both of these, right? Like it's hard to talk about how competitive a deck is going to be at Armory without knowing what your locals are like, and comparing those to our locals. And then the big asterisks on the, you know, the first point is just kind of like, oh my gosh, did I just completely blank out? What was the thing we were talking about before?
This is...
your mileage may vary on these things, and okay, sorry, complete brain fart, back on track. The balance between needing to create new things and create new words and keep the interest there, and wanting to also be accessible to new players. You cannot strictly do both. You cannot stay purely accessible to new players without also innovating in your game and adding new keywords and adding new interactions, or else everybody's just going to get bored. You know what I mean? So there's a balance between all of these things, but that doesn't mean it's not worth talking about. That doesn't mean it's not worth bringing up. Like maybe this is pushing away potential new players.
And it's interesting you sit there and talk about kind of, it's hard to judge this kind of stuff with people being, you know, without knowing the exact armory, because, you know, I think it may lead to a good point of, you know, Poop King's minute of, are there actually any good players in Fab? You know what I mean?
Oh, that's so funny that you brought that up, because I actually received a letter here. This letter is addressed to every pro player online discussing whether or not there are actually good fab players. And it comes to us from everyone at the 0-3 tables. And it reads as follows. Would you please shut the fuck up? Would you please shut the fuck up? Respectfully. Respectfully. We have been getting our ass kicked by you. We see you on streams at the Callings and you're 9-0, and we see you in round 2 at the Battle Hardened when we're feeling good about ourselves. We got our first win in of the day, and we see our opponent, and we know we're done. Our day is over. We better go in line for coffee now. There's no point in waiting. So when I see all of this discussion online about, are there any good Flesh and Blood players really? And it's coming from someone who top 8'd a Pro Tour, can you stop? Please think about other people. It's hurtful. And I'm not actually mad. I understand the conversation about it. I understand what they are getting at, right? They're getting at where will we view our current state 2 years, 10 years from now, right? And I understand, I enjoyed listening to the Runaways podcast this week, and I really listened to what Cody was saying. It was really great. He was saying, maybe he had overvalued math in Flesh and Blood. And I always love to hear that. I always love to hear that you don't have to be good at math. Which is not what he said, but it's how I interpreted it. And I am enjoying this conversation to an extent. There are a lot of takes that are coming out of this that are interesting to consider when we think about the history of Flesh and Blood, but infuriating to dwell on when it's just like, do we all suck at the game? And it's like, no, just. Can we move? No, and can we move on? No, can we talk about? It almost feels like it just feels to me like just kicking us when we're down of this week. Like Flesh and Blood is so good right now. It's so good, and this week it was just like there's. Deck's unfair. Brian Gottlieb's leaving Twitter because we were bullying him. Blah, 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 blah. And do all of us suck at the game? And it's like, no. Can we just...
It's a very weird time for discourse. And it's funny, it's not even just in Fab. I mean, there's been a ton of I think recently the whole discussion around Commander and its place as a format in MTG, a lot of people talking about this was a format judges for judges and people who understand all these complex interactions and blah blah blah. And I don't want Fab to get to that place of I guess you can kind of say tribalism. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be an us versus them. It shouldn't be we're pro, so our opinion matters more. It should be a game for everyone, and I think at the core it's but yes, obviously it was designed to be everybody talks about it was designed to be a low variance high skill cap game, but at the core of it all, it's a game. Whether you're a pro or whether you're sitting at the 0-3 tables, it should still be fun. And I don't like the added stress of just thinking about what everybody's saying on Twitter and worrying about this and this and that. It's just, I think we just want to have some fun.
Look, I don't take it to be backhanded when they ask this question. I don't.
No, it's not.
It's not. And I understand that, I love the pro players. I love what they do for this community. I love, my car rides where I'm listening to their musings. I love all of that. But I also love, I love the 0-3 table, baby. It's just this particular conversation has maybe ruffled my feathers. That's a better way of saying it.
You got it.
It rumbled my feathers because I think it's just one of these things that there feels to me often a judgment about not being at a certain threshold of the game, right? There seems to be some sort of like invalidating of players who aren't as good. And to Magic's credit, that's not the most prevalent in Commander. It happens. It's annoying. I don't love it. Certainly been in some pods where it's like, I don't know what I did wrong, but you seem to hate. You seem to think I'm bad at this game.
You're the threat. It's not that you're bad. It's that you're the threat, obviously.
It's my intimidating stature. I might be 5'9". I don't know. But I think that Magic, at least for me, it felt a little bit more socially acceptable to be mid than it does in Flesh and Blood. And I think that if you're out there and you're mid, I just want you to know you're beautiful. Poopy loves you.
Join us.
Poopy loves you just the way you are, all stinky and mid.
So you talked about your feathers, but how are your jimmies?
My jimmies?
Are your jimmies? Are your jimmies rustled?
You got to go to his OnlyFans for that.
First of all, sir.
First of all, how dare you? It's
First
Patreon.
of all, I would do quite well on OnlyFans. In fact, Jeffo gives me money just cuz. I don't even send him pictures. He just sends me money. That's not true. Anyway,
if he's sending you money for that, it's because he's already put the cameras in your home.
well, this is the trick to make sure our friends watch. We just put it towards the end. We put all call outs towards the end. Do you guys have anything we want to wrap up on here?
I think you ended it really well there, Craig. I'm all good there.
I do want to say I was sweating today because I thought I was gonna have to miss the pre-release weekend for this. I'm traveling literally the week after pre-release weekend, and I got them mixed up, but it's fine. We'll be there. You'll see us there, and maybe we'll have some stickers by that time.
We will have some stickers by that time. We'll have some. Hey, we'll talk about this with stickers. You come to Pittsburgh's ProQuest weekend. There will be stickers for anybody that does poorly. We will happily distribute, and you can say that you were mid just like us.
Top tables will not get stickers.
Hell no.
I will
you
give
make top
stickers
8
to anyone who
sticker.
wants them. You want a sticker? You're at the top tables. Take my fucking sticker. I am all about it. I would not discriminate on who gets a sticker.
Well, so go
Stickers are for the people.
If you're top 8, go to Craig. Me and Brice will say no. You get no sticker.
Yeah, if you're top
do you
8,
have the image queued up to be able to throw up? Or
I do.
we want to?
I do not have the image queued up, but
Okay.
we'll post it up
We'll
on
put
Twitter
one.
or something like that. Yeah.
don't worry.
It's
If
fun.
you're in top 8, I won't be hard to find. Probably not true.
I'll be the guy standing behind you, watching you learn how to play.
Yeah. I'll be too close and just over your shoulder. Be like, huh.
You'll be the kid who doesn't know how to draft and takes 5 cards and passes the rest of the face up.
that's a story for another day for people.
We'll
but
talk about that. Yeah.
oh god,
We will get you baby Flesh and Blood players all ready to go to a draft at
Yeah.
some point and not ruin my night, because the last like 5 drafts I've had, it's just been like, I don't know, I ended up with 6 more cards, and it's just like,
oh man, well, bring us home, Craig. Bring us home.
all right. Last time I think I just said like quippy, sign off. What do you guys think about just drop me? Or
Just drop me after this. Just drop me after this.
just drop
podcast.
me after.
Yeah, just drop me. I'm
All
dropping.
right, if that's all we got, drop me after this.
We're out.
Depends.
See you guys.